Let's be cops! Yeah! There's no one else here. It's just me. No one to high five. Marlon? Let's Be Cops is a film directed by Luke Greenfield, and it stars Jake Johnson and Damon Wayans Jr. The story is basically about two buddies that are kind of down on their luck, and they get invited to a costume party, and they dress up as cops. And in the process of that, some people mistake them for real cops. They like the way that feels, and so they decide to pretend to be cops on a regular basis. And that gets them into all kinds of trouble, and the movie kind of goes from there. The movie starts off pretty well. The two main characters are believable as friends and roommates, and the comedic chemistry between the two of them is definitely the foundation that this film is built on. Unfortunately, once you get past those two, there's really just not a lot else there. They seem to have had an idea for a bit, and they thought it was funny, and they decided to kind of build a movie around it. A lot of the elements to the story felt tacked on after the fact. There's kind of a love interest, and there's a bad guy, and the way that they kind of tell this story, even sometimes, doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. And it's a comedy, so you give it a little bit of a reprieve when it comes to not being Citizen Kane. But at the same time, the best comedies are the ones that work on multiple levels. The ones that are clever in a myriad of ways and not just have one thing that is kind of their strength. And that was kind of this movie. They had one thing that they did pretty well, and that was the chemistry between these two guys and the dialogue, and at times that was funny. Even the comedy at times seemed like they just threw everything at you in the kitchen sink. It was like they were unsure as to what jokes were going to hit and what we're going to miss. And so they were just going to throw everything at you at 100 miles an hour and just hope that maybe you laugh during the hits and the misses you kind of forgot about. As a result, I didn't really wind up laughing for extended periods of time during this film. There were definitely moments that were funny and enjoyable, and there were others that kind of weren't. Now, what's typical with pretty much any comedy is that there's always a measure of some seriousness that they try to bring in to try and bring the actual story together. And there was an element of that in this, but it didn't really work. I mean, they have this moment where it's supposed to be kind of the epiphany moment of the film, and it just didn't really make any sense, and I didn't really care. When you look at the story just on its own, it's just not very compelling. And even portions of it that are supposed to help you understand what's really going on don't really make sense if you scrutinize them for even more than a half a second. The whole pacing of this film seems very, very fast. It was like they were just trying to jam everything in that they could as quickly as they could. Because of that, there were some scenes that probably needed a couple extra beats for them to kind of sink in and to be believable, and they just weren't. It all kind of felt forced. A lot of the characters are really one-sided, and there's not much to them, and even the motivations behind what they say and what they do isn't really explored or explained. It just kind of happens, and you're just left to accept it. The foundation of this movie is built on the two main characters. These two guys also star in a show called New Girl, and The characters they play in this movie are very similar to the characters in that show, and their interaction with one another is the strength of this film, but it's also the only thing that it really has going for it. And in light of that, the shtick that they kind of have, it's an hour and 40 minutes of kind of that thing all the way through. So if you like that, then maybe you will go and you'll enjoy this film. If you don't really want to pay attention to the other elements, then it's very possible that you could go and have a good time. I didn't really care for it that much, so I can't recommend it. I'm going to give it a 2.5 out of 5. It's it's missing too much for it to be something that I can actually recommend that you could go see. I think the majority of people are not going to think that it's very good, and you're going to forget about it really, really quick. It's not memorable. It's not all that quotable. It's not something that I feel like is going to be like this cult hit or anything. It's just kind of something to go do. So this may be a rental, but maybe not. It just really depends on your taste in comedy, and that's kind of subjective. So, what do you think? Are you excited about this movie, or is this one that you've already kind of been planning on skipping? Leave a comment below, and maybe we can talk about it. And as always, click right here if you like what you see, and subscribe to even more of me.